Vienna waits for you, especially when you're not really young. What is your Vienna? And what is that city of dreams for you when you're my age or older? Is there still a city of dreams? Why, yes, there is. There's always a city of dreams. Which really relates, in my mind, to Dr. King and his journey. I wanted to start the talk honoring him because tomorrow is our national holiday honoring him, and because there's so many things that he contributed to our world, especially the call to brotherhood, and what I would call it, the call to get outside of yourself, to get outside of your judgments. I'm going to talk more about Dr. King, but I want to tell you my favorite judging story. This is my favorite judging story. Let's say in the 90s, I was watching some Oprah, and I believe I saw an episode on women who would write prisoners and get in relationships with them. Women who would write men in prison, and they would get in a relationship. And there was some show about it, and I believe I can't even remember right now, but I'm pretty sure the show was about how this was a detrimental thing you could do. It's not a good thing. And I was really judgy about it. And as it happened, I had a friend who, there's certain things that I think, why would you do that? Why would you actually write somebody and get in a relationship with someone who was in prison? I was very judgy about that. And I had a friend in Seattle who had done that. And I think I even had a little mini lecture worked up on how unhealthy it was. Because I'm pretty sure I talked about it to a few people. I had this great mini lecture. And it was one of those things that I never questioned. I just thought, well, that's a bad thing to do. Why would you do that? And as all of us, I get wiser. And a lot of times I get wiser because people show me fantastic examples, and I get to be enlightened by other people's experiences. At Unity of Boulder, we had a guest speaker who was a professor at the college in Boulder. And she started talking about judgment, the spiritual principle of why you might not want to judge other people. And she told this story about one of her students who wrote a prisoner and got in a relationship with the prisoner and the relationship ended up transforming this student's life. It transformed her life into that she became, let's just say, everything good happened to her because of the relationship with this prisoner. It wasn't just about the romantic relationship. It was the fact of her relationship with this person who was in prison, who opened her mind and her heart and helped her on her spiritual path. And since then, an even better example is I'm sure you've read some of the readings or some of the writings by people in prison who have come to recognize their spiritual path, and however they got there had some kind of transformation. I guess I like that story so much because I was so judgy. I didn't even allow that there could be anything different from what I thought. And so when the guest speaker gave the talk at Unity Boulder, I was like blown away because she started talking about it, and my mind went, oh, yeah, that's all bad. And then by the end of the talk, I was willing to concede that it wasn't it wasn't true, that my thought wasn't true about the way things are. I think it is critical, and it has everything to do with what Dr. Martin Luther King did and what we need to do, and what the one part of our mission statement is. There's one word that says welcoming. Like, we're at Unity of Des Moines, we're welcoming. What does that mean? That means we're welcoming to everybody. And I'll tell you what, I had a little holdout that I didn't even know I had, that I just figured out in the last year or so. And it wasn't so much that I wouldn't welcome anybody, but that I had a judgment. I had a judgment that because God is always willing to give me examples of why I should not judge, got blown apart by a relative of mine who is my son's cousin. I'm not going to call this person my relative because I'm not related by blood anymore. It's a different family. That was my son's through his dad. But his cousin Andy, or Andrew, who's changing into Andy, transgender. And it wasn't that I had anything I noticed. I would never have said that I had anything about somebody who was being a transgender person. But when this happened to someone in my family, I realized I don't understand it. It wasn't that I had any prejudice against it, but except that I didn't have understanding. I thought, well, how can I not have understanding? And as soon as I recognized that I didn't have understanding, that was the key to understanding. One of the best things I read was a book by John Irving called In One Person. It's just a novel that inside the mind of somebody who is a transsexual, or actually I don't even remember if that person is, but it's like John Irving often explores those themes in his work. But the point is, for me, that it was a holdout I didn't even realize I had, and that it is critical that we seek out the parts of ourselves where we're not welcoming by virtue of not understanding. Maybe it's prisoners. Maybe you have a thing about people who end up in prison. Maybe you have a thing about people's choice of sexual preference. Maybe you have a thing about how people look. Maybe you have a thing about tattoos. I don't know. Maybe you have a thing about I actually sometimes encounter people who ask me if I'm a minister, and I say, yes, I'm a minister. Then they have a certain expectation about what a Christian minister is, and then they start talking to me, and all of a sudden I see a little bit of a kickback, which is probably just really good for me to get a little kickback. I think it would be wonderful if all of us could have an experience of being different in a large group of people. It would probably really help all of our compassion. Most of the time, we grow up around the people who are like us. And we learn that that's the way it's supposed to be. And most of us also, especially if you wandered yourself into a Unity church, learn that welcoming people who are not always like us is good. I want to read you something. It was in the paper. It's actually one of the newspaper comics, but I'm just going to read it to you because it just opened my heart up. as somebody writing to a imaginary Dear Abby, only it's Dear Tiny. Dear Tiny, I'm 44 and coming to terms that I'm transgender. Breaking the news to people I've known all my life is a little weird. Suggestions? Older but not bolder. Salt Lake City, Utah. First, tell the ones who you can trust. They may be more supportive than you'd expect. Maybe too supportive. Like this. I'm transgender. Awesome. Let me do your makeup and nails. Ooh, we have to get you new clothes. Oh my gosh, and fix your hair. I'll call my salon. You may lose some people due to your revelation because they're too myopic to see the benefits of having transgender friends. There's a little scene at a bar. Are you sure that woman is flirting with me? Trust me, I grew up female. I know what she's thinking. Go talk to her. The people who remain will enjoy these perks. When I transition to a woman, you can have all my vintage bowling shirts. Sweet. But the biggest perk they will get is finally learning about the real you. Now that you know the truth about me, I have so much to tell you. I'm all ears. Something about that just opened my heart. It was so sweet. And I thought, wow, it doesn't matter if I understand why, although I do understand why. I think it's like this. It's like if somebody is transgender, it is because they want to be who they are. It's as simple as that. And probably a lot more complicated too. But let me say this. Let's go on that part. They want to be who they are, and they want to be able to be seen and to be welcomed and to be loved. I know that everybody here wants to be who they are, wants to be seen, and wants to be loved. And it is so critical for us that we do this for one another. That we look at our judgments and work with our judgments and create a welcoming place at Unity of Des Moines. It is vital. It's our work. It's an emergency. Okay? Have you read the newspapers? Have you looked at the news? It is a freaking emergency for us to start creating a place where people are welcome. And the spiritual work is we also have to create a space where we welcome all the parts of ourselves. Okay, that's the spiritual work. That is Jesus's message. That is the Buddha's message. And that's a whole bunch of other spiritual teachers' message. That we create a welcoming place for all of the parts of us. Now, judging in every single case is always a projection. That's what A Course in Miracles teaches us. Every time we want to judge someone for being whatever it is, we have a judgment about them. Maybe they're mean, maybe they're weird, maybe they're not nice, whatever it is, it's always a projection. Because it's something in us that we have not accepted. And we want to, it's so painful to us that we put it out onto the other people. That's what the whole concept of having a devil is. It's really great to have a devil out there because then we don't have to deal with what we perceive as evil in ourselves. It's just more comfortable. And actually, when I think about it, that I was a kid when Dr. Martin Luther King was marching, and when he gave that speech, I was a kid. And it would be wonderful if all the there was history about that struggle. Wouldn't it be wonderful? But I was watching the Golden Globes the other night, and there was a lot of jokes about the movie Selma, and that, yeah, isn't it good that we don't have to still have the fight? And everybody's laughing, because of course, it's ridiculous. There's still injustice and prejudice for people of color in the United States and other places. But the good news is that in here, in this room, and in here, and everybody's heart, we can work on making a welcoming place. And the other good news is that we can use our judgments just for information. Like, I still have judgments. I'm sure of it. I still have parts of myself that I haven't faced up to yet. And I'm pretty sure you do too. But the good news is that if you have an intention of noticing what's going on, you can work with it. The next time you notice that something irritates you or bothers you or somebody, go ahead and take a little time aside with yourself and notice what was bothering you and put a label on it. You know, they're so, let me think of my most irritating judgment right now. They're so fussy. They're so fussy about little things. Well, look at that judgment and turn it around on myself and say, am I fussy? Hell yes. Do I screech about things that don't matter? I'm sorry, every day. And then the good news is that I can determine to notice it and not act out. So that's the little thing. And what I really want to tell you is that the little things are going to get us to the mountaintop. Some of us, it is our job to lead marches on Washington. Some of us, it is our job to give speeches to thousands of people. Some of us, it might be our job to be brave and to act in a way that's not completely socially acceptable, whether it's a New Thought minister in a group of more traditional ministers, or whether it's to be a transgender person, or whether it's to stand up for whatever you're doing. Some of us, that's our job. And the bravery of that, the inspiration of that, to stand up in any way you stand up and say, this is who I am, and I'm going to take a chance and stand up and be this person. Be different, and go ahead, cast your aspersions, you know? I'm going to show up and be that person and go ahead, cast your aspersions. And maybe you just are like everybody else. Maybe there's nothing different about you. Then it's our job to really pay attention to how welcoming you are to people around you, to how welcoming you are when people are annoying and irritating, to how welcoming you are when somebody's talking about a political candidate that you don't go for. I know. I'm asking a lot of us. I'm not even going to talk about the football teams, because we know that doesn't really matter. But we do get passionate about our political ideology. We get convinced of it. And I'm saying that we here at Unity of Des Moines, we're going to make a stand where we are welcoming and where we make a bigger circle where everybody's included. And that means that some of the times we're going to come to church and people are going to be annoying. Because in the moment. But think of what we're creating. Think of what we can create. I mean, everybody here, think about what we can create if we make a space where everybody's welcome. That's the kind of church where the Buddha might walk into or Jesus might walk into and say, yeah, I think you guys got it. Let's take an offering for unity.